Cam, Cold Plunge Cam, thank you so much for coming on the AIM podcast.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Do you even have a last name anymore? Or does everyone just call you Cold Plunge Cam?
I do. It's Labar. I don't know. I kind of like to keep the cold plunge cam as much as I can, and that's usually in the Instagram world is how I introduce myself. So yeah,
That's so fun, man. I love it. I love how that's a whole another topic we could dive into, but just the whole world of branding and what you've been able to create through the identity of you associated directly in a small niche with cold plunges is so strong, but you're owning that space. It's really cool.
appreciate it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Have you been, I have to ask you, obviously we're going to dive into some fun stuff, but have you been in an ice bath today already?
Not today. Nope. Surprisingly enough, I haven't. I was on Tuesday, but then besides that, I've been in the river most mornings, which I don't count as an ice bath because it's still very warm. The water in the river is still like mid 60s Fahrenheit, so it's very warm. But it's just a good morning routine, even outside of the temperature itself, of just being able to sit in there in the morning as I wake up, feel the water around me, connect with nature a little bit, and then kind of get started with my day. So there's still plenty of that's been happening in the summer, but I'm going to be very excited as the temperature starts to drop here.
As the seasons change. Where are you based?
I'm in Boise, Idaho. I live, about 5 minutes from downtown Boise, which is pretty small. There's not a ton of, it's not very city like or anything. But Idaho is pretty slept on when it comes to the natural elements and being out in the national forest, the Boise National Forest, and up in the mountains, and how close you are also to a lot of the national parks. I mean, you're within 8 hours driving of Yellowstone and Grand Teton and places like that. Maybe it's a little bit more, but 8 to 10 hours. I mean, you're in some very, very beautiful areas, even if you drive up, 45 minutes from where I'm at. So
Wow. You make a good point. It's definitely underrated because I've never been there, nor have I heard a lot about it. And so I appreciate you shedding some light to our listeners about the area. We need to check it out more.
yeah, the rest of the people in Idaho probably hate me for it because they like it a secret. But yeah,
You're just trying to listen. I know where your heart is, man. You're just trying to help people. That's all.
yeah, appreciate it.
That's awesome, man. So I have to ask you. So what all do you do? Because are you a full-time ice bath man, or do you do additional things outside of all the cool things we see on social media?
Yeah, no, I very much do lots of other stuff. I still work full time. I work in finance for a pretty large technology company that's based up here. And so I'm working full time for them. And I did go to grad school back in 2018, and so I have a master's in business and finance, and so I very much was diving into the corporate world and wanting to work that way, and I'm still very glad that I have that opportunity to do that, and grateful that I have the job I do. But so the social media stuff has very much been a recent endeavor of mine over the last 14 months. I mean, I like 14 months to the day. I started this. I think my first post was July 13th of last summer, and so I just I've been balancing a little bit between the two, and I've really had to figure out how to manage my time. But it's been a great experience so far.
Man, that's incredible. And I know we'll get into this here in a second later in the show, just more in depth about the social media component of what you do. Obviously, you love ice baths and you've been able to use this device to share it with the world and impact so many people, which is incredible. With that comes a lot of responsibility and new territories, which we'll dive into. But for the listeners that are, understanding more of your story, I would love to just kind of, peel back the layers and understand why you got into cold plunging ice baths in the first place. Like, what was that initial draw to this practice, and why did you start doing it?
Yeah, the it's a good question. The initial reason was very much related to my mental health and me searching for answers of any kind, to try and feel better, to feel relief. I grew up, I was diagnosed pretty early on when I was 9 with anxiety, OCD, and Tourette syndrome. And so that really kind of shaped me into um, to how I operated day to day. And when I I shared earlier about grad school and stuff. When I finished grad school, it was May of 2020, right when COVID was happening and everything. And I moved up to Boise for the job opportunity, and I got hit pretty quick with about a depression that I just had never experienced before, and it scared me. It caught me off guard, because I'd never really experienced that level of low mood and just no desire to do anything, and feeling like things are pointless. um and it was really impacting me, and so that kind of started this search to figure out, okay, what lifestyle changes do I need to make. And one of those was when my buddy Zach came to visit me, and um he noticed how close I lived to the river. I'd never really touched it. I mean, I'm 200 yards from the river, and it's pristine, it's clean, it's easy to get into. Um, and he was like, "You're crazy. You never go in there like any time of year." And I was like, "No, I haven't. I mean, like I've walked past it a bunch, and that's really it." But he was like, "Hold on, you need to look at like these videos. Like look into Wim Hof, and kind of his cold journey. Look into Seek Discomfort and Yes Theory, and we're pulling up all these videos." And I was like, "Okay, this could kind of be an option, right? Of as I'm looking for things to help me to feel better, which everyone knows what that's like, where it's just, oh, there's a million levers you can pull to try and figure out how to feel better, and to have more energy, or to um, feel happier, and all these things. It was like the cold was just one of those ones that I kept going back to, as I was searching for anything that would help.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's so cool to hear how people obviously like this is the whole idea of cold plunges, ice baths right now are so relevant and they're getting so much just exposure and a lot of attention right now with a lot of different people. But it's cool to hear how different people have their own unique story of what got them into the practice. I come from a college basketball background, so I played Division One college basketball at Western Carolina, and my first experience with the cold plunge was doing it after practice, like before a game, like getting my body ready, days leading up to a game. But we hated it in the training room. Our coaches would make us do it. And there was like a negative association with like, oh, it's cold, it's miserable. But like, that was our perception until I got done with college. And then I realized the bigger benefits. But for you, coming with your background with it, what were some of the initial benefits that you quickly realized from the practice that you got, almost instantaneously?
Yeah. To hit on your point just a little bit more first, isn't it interesting though, right? How it can be wintertime, you walk out your door, you feel the cold, and you instantly have this feeling of like irritation, frustration, like it's an evil thing,
Yeah,
right? When there's so much of a mindset shift you can start to practice and see it as a useful resource. And so that's one of the benefits I've started to see, right, is
love
to
that.
start viewing stress as opportunities for growth. And the cold is just another one of those things that you can learn to adapt to and reframe the way that you see it and the way that you approach it. And so that was one of the biggest benefits for me, because I still see it from a therapeutic standpoint of, let's approach this problem or this stressor or this trigger or whatever it is as the cold, and let's start to focus on my breathing patterns and how I can improve those when I put myself into that situation, and then start to try and take that elsewhere into life. And so that's one of the biggest ones that I'm still trying to figure out how to get people to understand. Of There's so many situations in life where, at least for me and my anxiety, the way it's presented itself is I get caught off guard. Something happens, my breathing starts to get really short. I start to get into this bad posture. I start to look down, and and I can't really control my response to things. Um, if I can take what I'm learning in the cold and the deep breaths, the improved posture, the distance viewing, the improved mindset, if I can start to, put that elsewhere, that can be extremely powerful. So that's number one, right? The physical benefits is why you were probably doing it in college and for basketball, and those are very real, right? For muscle inflammation, for joint pain, for arthritis, those types of things. But for me, it was much more of the what I was noticing in my mood. And after reading through a lot of the research, right, there is a there is a huge increase in dopamine.
Mm.
And there's that dopamine response that happens when you get in the cold and get in an ice bath that is shocking in nature. And it's anywhere between, I think it's like 200 or 300% increase, which is crazy. There's not many things in this world that you can do to get that type of response. And what's really interesting about it too is it's not just a quick spike in dopamine release, but it has this sustained, almost extended release effect where for hours afterwards, I would just, my mood was good. It was like, I feel good. I feel relaxed. My mind feels clear, and it would stay that way for hours. Right. And so I saw it as a useful tool that wasn't necessarily a solution, but it was a very therapeutic tool that I could continue to come back to and use as I was trying to get further in, understanding what I needed to do.
That's incredible. You say a few things that are quite interesting. I'd love to point out. Like one of the things you kind of you kind of hit on this whole idea of like the perspective that you have with some of these activities is very important. And many people look at cold plunging and they're like, "Oh, that's just a miserable thing. It's cold. I'm uncomfortable." They don't understand, maybe if they haven't gotten on the other side of it, they don't see all the benefits that you just explored. But what I find interesting is that same mindset, that same approach goes to everything else in life. I think like if we can start to understand how much power we have to manipulate that view, it's just so relevant and so important. Like I even remember, I know, using another college basketball example, all my teammates, and I myself included, until I learned how to shift perspective, used to hate running. Like that was another punishment. But with a quick shift of perspective, it's like, wait a second. When the coaches are making me run, obviously I'm not praising, like, if we made a mistake or we did something wrong, like that's the reason we're running. I'm not praising the error that we made. But the actual act of running was an opportunity to grow, was an opportunity to become better conditioned, was an opportunity to become more fit. Same thing with an ice bath. Like there are obviously all these incredible health benefits, but like putting yourself in a position that most people, the majority of people, think is difficult, or they don't want to do, that creates power within itself. And creating that understanding of like just that simple shift can actually unlock so many things for you, not just with ice baths, but just on life in general.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where I'm trying to translate that my same response in the cold to those other areas that you're talking about, right? Of can I reframe my mindset on it and go, if my flight gets canceled on a holiday weekend and I'm stuck in the airport and I'm going to be there for 24 hours and there's nothing I can do about it and it's completely out of my control, can I respond and say, this is okay, like I'm all right, and figure out a way to move on rationally, right? And then respond rationally to the situation after.
So true,
So
man. So true. I want you to take us through the journey of an ice bath. If someone's listening to this and they've never experienced it personally, I want you to get as vivid as you possibly can to take them through the journey from right before you get in to the initial submersion, the dunk, if you dunk, and like your time in the water to getting out. And I just, whatever you want to share, feelings,
Yeah.
emotions, heightened, whatever. I just want you to make it a fun experience. But I want someone to know from your perspective, someone who's done it thousands of times, what that experience is like from start to finish.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think anyone's really asked me that, like to describe the process and the stages and everything. So kudos to you. I think okay, it starts in the beginning with there's some nerves, right? It's kind of like a doctor's office nerves. Like you're going in for a shot or you're going in for lab work or something. At least for me, there's a little bit of nerves when I started. Um, Totally normal, right? I think the other big thing. So getting into it, you're gonna lift up that first foot, right, to put it in. You're gonna put that first foot in, and the first thing that's gonna shoot back from your head is go, nope, right? Nope, we're not doing this. We're not doing this, and that's why I think in the very beginning it's important to before that first toe touches the water, you've made the decision already, right? You've already made the decision to do it, and so um, there's a commitment battle. It's a battle of wills between your mind and your body, which is what I think is so fascinating about it. So there's some nerves. There is a battle of wills of almost like voices in your head of who's really in charge. Um, Once you get in, there's pretty much a universal response, no matter who you are, of a shortness of breath, of a kind of closing in of like cognitive function. So anywhere between 30 to 80% of your cognitive function will decline momentarily while your body is learning to adapt to this. And so that can look like not really being able to pay attention to what anybody's saying, to really understand, to really talk even can be difficult. So there's this initial, and hopefully this doesn't sound super scary, but I mean, I'm trying to just like explain it in
You're
detail,
doing a
right?
great job. I'm
Um,
enjoying this.
there's a shortness of breath. There's a, okay, I need to get my breathing under control and not do this tight, short breath thing. Um, and so after that, you start to, um, you got to get the breathing under control. And so that first 30 seconds to 60 seconds is all about your breathing and learning how to get your breathing back under control because your heart rate is going to increase. Um, that the breathing is going to get a little bit out of control. And the goal is to get that heart rate back down to a level where you feel like you're back in control. Um, that's the biggest piece. So the first 60 seconds is the hardest. That first minute is the hardest. Once you get past that, you're going to start to feel a little bit more in control, and there may be a little bit of pain associated with like your fingers and your toes, and even the sides of your neck, and your hands and areas like that, because your body goes into full on vasoconstriction where all the blood vessels will shrink really tight. And for people who haven't, who aren't really practicing cold exposure, you're not used to having to constrict those blood vessels so tight all the time, especially in certain areas of your body, your extremities. And so there's a little bit of pain that can be associated with that. And I've experienced it a decent amount. And I've found that holding still and not wiggling the fingers, wiggling the toes, moving around, usually holding very still can help you to manage that for a little bit. And that's not something that to be too worried about, especially if you're only in there for a few minutes or so. But after you get out, that is kind of the reward phase. The instant you step on out of that, it's you're not cold anymore. you think of stepping out of a hot shower or stepping out of a pool and you're like, oh, I'm a little bit cold. It's a complete opposite when you get out of an ice bath. Even when I get out of the river in February, as soon as I stand up out of that river in February, it could be 25 degrees outside. Um, I'm good. I feel warm,
Mm.
and I feel in control. I feel accomplished. I feel incredible, and that's the beginning stages of that endorphin release that just leaves you feeling so accomplished for so long.
That was
Hopefully, I illustrated that well.
That was an incredible illustration. I really appreciate you going through the depth and the just being thorough with that because I've listened to a lot of your interviews preparing for this podcast as I do with many of our guests is, try to do my due diligence and I always try to find questions or topics that I think are interesting that haven't been asked yet. And one, I think that was cool because you haven't really touched on that before personally, but also I think it's interesting, like if someone's listening to this and they haven't had a chance to personally experience cold, how can we just like give them that picture, just because of how powerful the experience is. I want people to understand it.
Yeah, totally. No, and I appreciate you asking it because makes me I don't know, makes me kind of want to write a book or something and like try and go into a little bit more detail so that people can kind of get a good understanding of it. But I think it's just, you gotta dive in. You gotta try it.
100%. It's funny you mentioned the extremities can get a little painful. I remember in college some of my teammates, actually one in particular, Ano Steeker, who's been on the show. He's actually now he's playing professional basketball, was an amazing player. But I remember he went on Amazon or wherever and ordered these like little toe covers. And there was literally just like this little tiny thing just to fit right over the toes. The foot's exposed, but your toes are covered. And I was like, is that really helping that much? And he swore by it. Like, bro, come on now.
Yeah. Well, and what's incredible is you do adapt. Your
Yeah,
body adapts over time, and I the pain went away, right?
sure.
Because your muscles, the muscles and the ability to constrict and expand get tighter and they get stronger. And so those types of things go away with consistency. And so circulation issues or improving circulation is another benefit of ice baths because you're consistently having to work those blood vessels and work those muscles to do that.
Absolutely. And it's, I've never felt something quite like the experience you get when you get out of an ice bath. That is, I don't care how painful it gets. I would do that every single time if I know that I get to experience what I get to experience when I get out. And I think once people do it a couple times and they kind of get that, it's easy to talk to those type of people. It's the people who haven't experienced it that are still maybe on the fence. But man, that feeling you get when you get out, I just feel like I can conquer the world. I feel like I run through a wall. It's such a good feeling, man. It really is.
Yeah, 100%. It's what drew it to me, drew me to it for sure.
That's awesome. Now, I've noticed in a couple of your recent posts, and if you're comfortable sharing with this, I'd love to hear more. But you've done some blood work recently with Blokes, and we've actually just had on Josh Whalen, founder of Blokes, on the show. Actually, that was the most recent episode that we published. But I would love to hear any interesting findings, that you've seen through your practice with ice therapy and how that's incorporated or impacted your blood results.
Yeah, I haven't the the endeavor with blokes has been fairly recent. I did, that first panel back in May, and that's the only one I've done so far. So I can't really speak to how the cold has affected my results or really done kind of a controlled experiment with that, right?
Sure.
But I am happy to share like the results and what changed for me, because that was something that, as someone who is a content creator and we've had a little success, right? There's a lot of times where brands will reach out and they offer things, right? And it's nice to be able to get samples of stuff and to try different things, um, and that's been something I've been super grateful for. When Blokes reached out and offered the blood panel, I it was another one of those things where I was like, oh, okay, great. Like, let's do it. I'm curious. I haven't done blood work in a while. Um, and what came back from the panel was shocking because here I was going into it as someone who's just like, cool, like free stuff, uh, and and I came out of it with I need to fix some things,
Mm,
and not only that, these are things that directly impact my mental health, such as my hormone levels, my testosterone, my DHEA, um, some thyroid dysfunction. Those are things that affect your mood and can affect your motivation and your ability to kind of go on day to day and libido and just all sorts of stuff, right? And that was what I was finding from this blood work was I had very low testosterone, low DHEA, some thyroid dysfunction, just all and even other hormones. I mean they were all off, and they were not in an optimal range. And so I like that from what turned into like a something that was just, oh, it's we'll find out, and maybe partnering with them, right, to help promote it, um, turned into a very integral part of my journey to feel better. And it has continued to play that because I've since addressed a lot of those hormone deficiencies with some supplementation, right? Some taking some some libido supplements that are more herbs and stuff, but then also a DHEA supplement, a multivitamin geared towards thyroid health, those types of things. And that has made a huge difference in how I felt over the last 3-4 months since I did it. So I'm so grateful to Joshua for reaching out in the first place because it's something that truly, I don't want to look like another influencer just trying to advertise something that they're getting paid to do,
sure.
because it really isn't. It really wasn't like that. It really wasn't. And it's something that really has been a huge part of the journey for me. So um I'm really excited. Over the next few weeks I'm gonna do the results again to see how my levels have changed since I did the first panel and since I started addressing with supplementation. And I'm really curious to see how they've changed since then. So I'm excited about it.
I really appreciate you sharing that. One of the main goals for the show is obviously to bring on incredible guests that have awesome stories and are doing things that are inspiring and encouraging. But I love just ways that we can just bring exposure and awareness to important things that people can benefit from, such as being proactive with their health, getting access to more information on topics such as getting an ice bath. Like these are things that if you're not, well versed or, super into, like you might not have a ton of exposure or knowledge on. And so these conversations, I think, will hopefully be very helpful to those listening. And I appreciate you kind of giving your perspective and sharing some of the things that you've dealt with personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I want to point out too, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I don't have any medical training, or education really for that matter. I'm very inquisitive and wanted to find what was working. And on top of that, I got to a point with the depression that when I decided to make the page, I did not care what I was going to share. What I was going to share was going to be as relentlessly vulnerable as I could be, and true to who I was and what I was experiencing, because too many of us are are not are not sharing the struggle, and they're not admitting that there's that they're not okay sometimes, right? And I think because of that, it's um part of the strategy with my page. I mean, even outside of like a personal level, but like a strategic part of my content is, this is just my authentic story, and I can't possibly care what everyone thinks about what I say, because at one point I really didn't care about anything, right?
Wow.
And so the page is exactly who I am, and I don't care who knows it. Essentially, that's kind of been the strategy. Um,
I have a
yeah,
ton of respect for your courage and your boldness to share that, and also to just explore, creating content. I've been fortunate the last few months I've lived here in Orlando, and I'm in a house with a lot of guys that pursue social media as their full-time job, and like that is the thing that they do is put out content. And I was having a conversation with one of the guys in the house, and I was like, there's an element to social media that I want people to understand. There's an element of service. Like you're serving a worldwide community now and putting yourself in a vulnerable position. And I'm sure everyone has different, reasons. Some people are driven by what the outcomes of what you can create, and some people are driven by more of the impact you can have, and that's just human nature. But at the end of the day, you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position by creating that content, and of course you're making the decision to do it. No one's forcing you to, but at the same time it's a huge act of service that I have a ton of respect for, especially the people that are doing it with the right intention to make an impact. And I've seen some of incredible pieces of content you've put out, of just clips of all the different comments and the people that are impacted positively by your journey and what you're sharing on social media.
yeah, I appreciate it. And I mean, one of those two, the point behind it of sharing that, just kind of some anonymous messages I got, what was not to point out necessarily um, the impact I'm making, but also to point out that these are areas where everyone struggles. And I think for a long time there was this idea inside of me that we don't other people don't feel the way I do all the time. Other people are always happy and they're always successful, and there's such a humanity about it though that everyone experiences um certain levels of loneliness and certain levels of sadness, and that's okay. Those are things that are part of the human experience, right? But the point of that video really was to help people to go, to understand that they're not alone. They're not. People deal with stuff. We all do.
All of
So
us, every single person, no matter who you are, no matter what you look like, no matter where you come from, everyone goes through different things in their life. That's just the way life works. There's nothing, no one has a perfect situation, no matter what it looks like on social media or even in real life. Sometimes you see someone's life in real life and you're like, man, they must have it all together. And they must have there's always things that come up. And it's cool to see someone like you who are you're very genuine about your approach to social media, and you share the excitement, you share the good things, you share some of the things you struggle with. And I think that's the reason you've been able to draw such a really like build a really strong community, because they can trust you, and there's that vulnerability there where they believe everything you say because you're real and you're authentic.
yeah, I appreciate it. Means a lot. Yeah, I mean, I want to, again, is just being as authentic as I can, um and that authenticity applies to every area of life and every emotion.
For
So
sure. I want to dive in. You kind of touched on the social media side. I would love to explore this a bit deeper. So what was that initial, because obviously you're getting going in cold plunges, you're starting to do ice baths, you're starting to take on this practice. What was that in that moment where you're like, what, I might want to prop up my phone and record this and share it with the world? Like where was that kind of in your timeline, and what was kind of the motivation behind that?
yeah, it was a full 12 months after my first ice bath.
Wow.
I went a full year of ice bathing. It started in July, so it was July 2021, and I started to get in the fall, and I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing this through winter. I'm going to go in the river all winter, right? And this was before any of the social media stuff that I had posted. Um, and I went through a full year of experiencing it and taking notes of how it made me feel, and um, how it was affecting me and all that type of stuff. But then after about a year, yeah, I was just kind of scrolling through one day, right? And that was never the intent when I started, right? To do the social media stuff. I was hardly on it, and I hated consuming it. But after about 12 months, I was scrolling one day, and so because I've been doing it for a little bit, some ice bath stuff pops up, right? And I mean, almost all of them that are popping up, they're all related to exercise and to fitness and to physical recovery and athletes and Olympians and and all that type of stuff, right? And so the initial approach of it was, okay, how do I make this seem accessible to everybody? This isn't just something that needs to be accessible to people at their, level of peak performance and physical stature. Like this is for anybody who has the courage to get in, right? And so like I think my first, my one of my first videos uh was I was just eating Chick-fil-A. And like I just kind of set up Chick-fil-A on the side of the ice bath and I just kind of got in like it was no big deal, right? And I just kind of got in and was just eating nuggets um and just sitting in my ice bath and didn't even acknowledge anything about it, right? I was just that was it. That was basically it. And the goal for that was, yeah, to be funny, but also to just like to help people notice you can be I don't know, you can be a weirdo like me and just do it, right? It doesn't you don't need to be an athlete. And but strategically, yeah, there was not much talk about the mental health benefits of it, and so that was a huge part of the page and pushing the page was
Yeah.
to help enlighten people on the potential mental health benefits to doing it, regardless of who you are.
Mm.
And so that was the big push in the beginning.
When you started, did you have any idea that it would turn into what it is today? Like, was there even a thought of this, like, this could take traction, or like, did you have any realm of that?
There was a little bit, yeah, because I definitely did believe in myself, and that I could really get it to go because I was pretty convinced this was a very narrow niche that wasn't being targeted. People weren't really targeting it as their niche, and so I thought, man, I got a chance here. And also I always felt like I was pretty good with puzzles and stuff, and from a young age, I kind of needed to be that way with the Tourette's because when I would tick and things and like my ticks would get worse, there was always something happening that I had to figure out what it was and be like, oh, maybe that's contributing to the ticks, right? And so I always did a lot of just this analysis internally. And so when it turned to Instagram and there's an algorithm involved, I was like, oh, this is fun. I was like, I was like, oh, I can play this game. I've done this for a while now. And so I started, I started messing around with ideas and um, with all sorts of just the different variables and things that you can tweak when it comes to content to figure out what resonates with people and what they engage with. And so um, it all happened very very quickly. Like I said, the first post was in July. Um, within a month and a half, I had hit 10,000 followers, and things were rolling so fast. There were about 5 clips that it all kind of went viral at the same time at that point in late August. That I went from 10,000 followers to 100,000 in 4 days, because it snowballed into just this giant, you know, uh, thing of virality, and so there were some there were some difficult times with that, just with all that happened, and with my mental state and things that made it tough. But yeah, it all happened very very fast, and it's been like I said, 14 months now, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to cope and to balance with everything as I'm still working the full-time job. You know.
I want to unpack that a bit more with some of the things that you've learned through the process of social media and also dealing with it. But before we touch on that, because that's serious and I really am interested in that. What were some of the levers that you discovered that were successful for you, kind of getting that initial surge of growth? Were there anything in particular that you found that it was resonating with people better, certain types of content? Like what did you find that kind of helped you have that surge?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think first off, for this is geared more towards creators, I think. Um, using using all of the functionality that a platform gives you I don't have any proof to back this up, but I think using all or most of the functionality a certain platform like Instagram gives you to create content, I think you get rewarded for. And what I mean by that is when you create a reel, right? I think that things like the text, right, and using their captions, um, using their subtitles, using their music, using their hashtags, using the functionality to tag people, um, to create a description with keywords, all of that type of stuff. I have a thought in the back of my head that says, hey, when you start using all of those things, you're going to get rewarded for it. That's kind of how I look at it. And so I think that was a big thing. But the other thing that I think resonated and that made it so successful was I didn't want to be a creator who was telling people what to do, right? Or telling them how to live, or always just kind of giving tips and facts and things like that. I think it's all very valuable. When you're listening to someone who knows what they're talking about. But for me, it was always a scrapbook, so to speak, or a personal journey, a here's what's working for me, here's what's not working for me, and just continuing to share that because I want people to be able to relate and understand, uh, for, person to person, and not necessarily just feel like they got to take notes to what they're watching, right? And so I think that was a big piece of advice I got early on was to just make it my story. It's who you are. This is your experience, and it's your page, and people will they'll make that decision.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that. I think it's really important. I think that's a bigger like just think if more people adopted that mindset of like, look, you don't have to believe the same things I believe in. You don't have to, agree with everything I say, but my story is my story. My faith is my faith. My beliefs are my beliefs. My all these things are mine, and I'm happy to share them with you. And hopefully, I can encourage you and bring value to you because of the things that I've experienced. But it's so cool when people are able to really tap into their own personal experiences and share that, but also, not be influenced by taking a certain lane because they're thinking about what others are, how others are viewing them or whatnot, but they're really just authentically sharing their experiences. Like that's super powerful.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, agreed.
I want to talk to you though about you kind of brushed on about I'd like to explore it. Like as you had this surge of, I guess a community, people like real life people that are now following this pursuit of yours to empower people to create content to share your journey. Talk about some of the things that come along with that because I think this is something that there's a large portion of our population that desires to be maybe in the position you're in with a following on social media and have a community that they can create content in front of, but there's a lot of things that I feel like are not addressed or not talked about that come along with that I'd love for you to maybe explore or kind of share with our audience.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The first thing that comes to mind is just that perspective is everything, right? You, it's so easy to feel like you understand someone else like from the outside, right? And it's so easy to draw your own conclusions um, on what the experience might be like, or how lucky they are, how fortunate they are, all those types of things. Um, when you don't really get the full picture, and that doesn't necessarily have to do with me. I think if anything, this journey for me has helped me realize like the struggle is real for everybody. And some of the stuff that I went through pretty early on was, um, when the page took off, and like I said, like those 4 days where it went to 100,000, um, I, very, very like subconsciously and just kind of in my body, um, started to experience symptoms like that. Just it didn't seem like it was tied to that stuff, but it was. And it was things like lack of sleep, or not being able to sleep, and the extra anxiety and the irritability and just the thoughts going constantly. Um, and it was almost like I was in overdrive, and so the anxiety went through the roof. I lost my appetite for a bit. It was like these things where I was like, am I sick? Like, am I I'm losing weight? What is happening here? I think I lost like 8 or 9 pounds at one point when that all happened, which was pretty wild. And so there were these like physical symptoms that that I started to experience early on, where my body was just trying to process what was going on, right? And internally there was some struggle of, okay, what's most important right now? Now that this has happened, what's most important? It's not like, look, Ma, I made it. I'm at 100,000 followers.
Sure.
It was, what do I do with this now? And how do I make this most impactful? What are my real goals with this platform now that this has happened? Do I want to just make money as fast as I can? Do I want to immediately quit my day job and just do this full time without a second thought? Do I want to um, focus on making an impact with others and just keep going? There were just all these thoughts of and pressure internally of you need to monetize fast, like let's go, let's make money. And that was very much related to um, kind of how I was raised, and a very big capitalism type of influence in my life, and which I'm very grateful for. But there's some there's some internal uh, there's a lot of comparison, and there's a lot of things that you kind of have to work out of and give yourself time to process and go, what do I want to do with this opportunity that's been given to me? And I'm still, I think what I learned, and here's kind of the final answer to your question. I think what I learned is your body needs time to process, regardless of what it is. And I think far too often we rush to a conclusion or an answer or a course of action without giving ourselves enough time to really experience what we need to and process the emotions and everything that comes along with something like that. Because it is now 14 months after I started my page, and I am still telling myself that I need to be patient, and I just need to keep doing what I'm doing. And yeah, it's hard. I need to take breaks sometimes, but I need to just trust my body and my instincts. And so that's what it's been, is just trusting, essentially.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's been one of the coolest things about the show is we've been super fortunate to have on some very successful people in the world of social media. And a big theme that I've seen pretty, strong across the board is, to some degree, people will refer back to saying, like, you have to know and remind yourself why you started doing it. And no matter what the numbers say, if you go from 100,000, a million, 10 million, doesn't matter. Like, there has to be at least some level of just that reminder of, like, why did I start doing this? And yes, there are added pressures, or there's all these new elements now. My DMs are flooded, brands are reaching out, they're trying to get me to do this sponsorship, but like, why did I start? And am I going to let myself drift from that and get consumed in these added elements? Or am I going to say, look, this is why I started. This is why I'm going to continue to go. And now, there's blessing and privilege and the pressure that comes with this. And now I need to decipher, like you're saying, not in a rushed way, but just like I need to explore the new territory of where I am, because I've grown and I have put the time in and I've pursued this thing, and it's turned into something larger than it was when I started.
Yeah, and if it's something that isn't enjoyable to me, right? If the process and uh, making content and doing what I'm doing stops being enjoyable, um, then I'm probably not doing it for the reason I started doing it in the first place, right? And so I have that same thing every time, is okay, let's go back to the original reason or reasons why I started this. And there can be a few, and you can kind of juggle a few different reasons. Um, but if I always tell myself, if I ever get to the point where I'm starting to make content, and I don't want to, and it doesn't really interest me that much anymore, then that means I've veered a little bit too far away from the reason I started in the first place. And I probably shouldn't continue, right? And so, there has been some balance that I've had to do with that, of reminding myself why I'm doing it. Because if I'm now doing it and I'm not enjoying it, right, that's not sustainable for me. It's just not. And so the goal is to continue doing what I think is really resonating with people, what's having an impact. And I see that if I get a message that just says, "Hey, this is the first time I've done an ice bath. It's because of you, and it's made such a huge difference." Right? That's what gets me going, and that's what makes me happy. And if it's somebody like that and they live in Estonia and they send me that, I'm ecstatic, man. And that's like, no way. Like, look at the reach that this thing has. That's incredible. And it makes me so happy, right? Um, and I'd like to think if I can if that keeps happening, the other good stuff will come. And
Yes.
it's just a matter of patience. And so if I'm somebody who's a content creator, and this is getting a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more in depth, but like if I'm someone who's a content creator and I want to make money, and that's one of my first priorities. um I'd like to think that you stay true to the purpose of why you started the page in the first place, and that those things come if it's supposed to, and I don't know how else to describe that. I just
It's good.
It's something I'm still learning. I mean, at the end of the day, that's it. I'm still learning what that's going to look like for me. And if there's a possibility that 12 months from now I go, I just don't want to do this anymore. And that's okay, right? It's okay. That's what I've had to just remind myself. I can stop anytime if it's become too much and I don't feel like um I need to anymore. So that's always in the back pocket.
I love that perspective, man. You talk about the fulfillment and impact you get from seeing someone take an ice bath for the first time. You have a really interesting new, like I guess, content type of content where you're inviting strangers to join you in an ice bath while you're actually taking one. I want to hear a little bit about that because that's I just personally enjoy that content. But maybe just share like some cool experiences you've had or some funny stories of like those interactions, how most people perceive it, and maybe some of the people that have chosen to explore the ice bath. Have you had any kind of funny stories that have come from those things?
Yeah, it's been pretty incredible, and I think it's been received really well by people too, because um I'm so lucky to live where I live, because I'm able to set up like that along the river in just a gorgeous spot. And there's a what they call the green belt. There's a pathway that runs along the river for miles. And so one day I just kind of thought, you know what, I'm just going to kind of set up here, and I'll as people walk by, because it's middle of summer, I'll just I'll just start inviting people and see what happens, right? And there's been a few of them that have just been super good, and it was their first time, and there's a little bit of peer pressure from some friends that might have been walking with them, right? And um, I think it's just really fun, because they really were like just these candid, kind of fun clips where I would just sit there long enough until somebody showed up, and whatever happened from it, that's what I posted, and a lot of times it was some good stuff. But yeah, that's been a fun kind of new adventure for me. I wanted to take it a step further, do like some more of those, right? And um, but I've just haven't quite gotten to it yet, but it's been a fun summer project. So
I'm a big fan of your personal solo content, but I love how you incorporate people into it now. I think it's super unique, and I think it's fun for just people to be a part of the journey with you.
yeah, thanks, appreciate it. Yeah.
This has been such an incredible episode, dude, and I'm absolutely just so grateful for your time coming on here, sharing your just your vulnerable self with us and getting to hear more about your story, man. I'm super encouraged by you and what you're doing. I have a couple of quick fire questions just about your personal ice bath situation, and then obviously we can wrap up this episode. But how frequently do you actually take ice baths? And is this something that fluctuates, or do you kind of have a strict routine with your personal practice?
Yeah, it fluctuates a bit, which is kind of the difficulty in it, right? Especially if you're traveling and in different locations and stuff. But one thing that has stayed very consistent has been turning my shower cold at the end in the morning.
Mm.
That's been a non-negotiable for me. Is every morning when I take a shower, the tail end of my shower is turned cold. I give myself enough time to breathe through it, and that is an everyday thing. It could be 15 seconds one morning, it could be 2 minutes the next morning, but that's a powerful moment that I notice in the shower of it's just me by myself in this bathroom in my thoughts, making that decision to do it. And so that's kind of the first step, I think. Now the ice baths, the actual ice baths themselves, like in summer and stuff, it's probably been closer to twice a week, just because given my situation and liking to go up to the river and fill it up and do all that. There's a little bit of logistics that's kind of annoying, right?
Sure.
Um, and so it's probably closer to twice a week. But when it's the winter time, then it becomes really fun because I'm, like I said, about 200 yards away. I walk out there, jump in, and I mean, in the dead of winter, it's high 30s, it's mid 30s even sometimes, and so I'll be out there 4 or 5 times a week. But I do buffer in some rest time, right? At least a little bit. You don't want to go so hard every single day. Like most things, there's a need to rest a little bit, and rest is productive, and that's an important thing for people to remember. So that's about the cadence for me. I think is I'd like to be on average 3 or 4 times a week in terms of like an ice bath, cold plunge.
Mhm.
Um, that's kind of my sweet spot, I think.
That's awesome. That's super interesting to hear. And what is your ideal temperature? Obviously, you talk about this wide spectrum of, right now it's maybe not as cold as it will be in the winter, but where's the sweet spot for you where you prefer like you just ideally prefer?
Yeah, I like as cold as I can get. If I can get it high 30s, 40, like 41, I kind of like being there. That's a very, very tough spot for somebody to get into as a beginner, and I wouldn't I wouldn't recommend it. But I like that because it's pretty intense. Um, I don't need to be in there I don't need to be in there for 10 minutes to try and feel like I'm getting the full effects of what's happening. I can be in there for a little bit of shorter amount of time. Um, and I can truly get the the reduction in inflammation and stuff from a very cold temperature like that. Which I've talked a lot about the mental health side of things, but a reduction of inflammation is huge too when you're doing it. I mean, that's a huge benefit. And so I typically like colder. I like to push myself, and so in the winter it's like if the sides of the river are freezing over and it's 34 degrees, it's like I love it, man. I love it, every minute of it.
Dude, so good, man. Now, last question I have for you, the quick questions. Do you participate at all in contrast therapy? I know that's obviously cold plunge ice baths are very relevant, but so are, people that are exploring the saunas, the hot tubs into something cold, that contrasting of temperatures. Is that something that you also do, or do you just kind of stick mainly in the cold space?
Yeah, that's something I'm definitely getting more into. I got a sauna tent from Sweat Tent, the brand. and they sent me a sauna tent, and I've had the opportunity to take it up into kind of the mountains and do a more remote location, and do a wood burning sauna, and so it's a lot of fun. And so I've done that a few times over the last couple weeks, and then I go jump in the river, and then do a couple more rounds. And so that's been a relatively new thing for me, and I'm still getting a bit more into sauna, but have definitely noticed the benefits of sauna, and sleeping better, and just all of it. So I'm a big fan of that as well. If there's a way to incorporate both of those things into a daily and weekly routine, I mean, do it.
Awesome, man.
Got
And
to
you
do it.
obviously you've experienced Muscle Mountain. You've been out there with Eric, and he rips it pretty hardcore. It's very hot and very cold, and it's back and forth, and you're like, I'm about to pass out.
Yeah, yeah. And I tell him, I get, this isn't my thing, man. Listen, he likes it cold. I don't do this.
Yeah,
But I'm getting there. It's a very similar process too, right? It's learning to breathe and bring that heart rate down, and control your response, and reframe the way you're seeing it. It's a very, very similar thing. So
that's awesome, man. Last question I have for you. You've been incredible, and I'm very grateful for your time. But where's all this headed for you? I know you talk about, maybe a year down the road, you could just be like, look, I don't want to do it anymore. And that's completely a fair answer. But do you have any sort of vision or direction of where you hope this kind of continues to move forward?
yeah, it's a good question because I ask myself that every day. Um, I I see it with the potential to become a much bigger thing for me, and um, I would like to be in a position to just raise awareness around mental health. And cold plunging has essentially been the vehicle for me to tell that story, right? And it hasn't been something that I'm framing as a cure, right? That's not what I've been doing, and that's not what I want to do. But it has been something that's been a huge part of my mental health journey, and I think has been extremely valuable. Um, but I want to share more about mental health. I want people to know it's okay to be vulnerable. I want people um, to not feel like they have to stay silent about those types of things. And so I don't know what that looks like for me in the future. I would love to get to a point where I could travel, and I could tell that story more, and not have to worry about a full-time corporate job with a technology company that is a bit demanding, right? And where I could put all that stuff to the side, and really just hopefully have an impact around the world. I would love to do something like that, but what that really looks like for me, I don't quite know yet. And I think that's some of the excitement and some of the uncertainty that I'm okay with, because I need to be patient, right? And I need to just kind of keep going, and do what I feel is right. So some people would probably say, well, you're not planning hard enough, and your goals, it's not a stretch goal. You're not stretching your goals enough, etc. But to make it sustainable for me, and to keep a balanced life, this is the approach that I'm taking, and it just continues to work. So
It's amazing, man. Well, listen, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I've a ton of respect for people that put themselves out there and genuinely want to help people, and not only help people but help themselves. And I think there's a large misconception of the power of self-improvement and how unselfish that is. It's very unselfish, very selfless to improve personally because you're going to show up better and make a bigger impact on others when you can pursue, routines and habits and rituals that make you a better person. And you doing all of this is obviously very, very powerful. So, dude, Cam, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for coming on the AIM podcast, and I'm super grateful for you and everything you're doing.
absolutely, thanks for having me on, Doug. You've done a great job with the podcast. I'm loving this. So continue to do it.
Thank you so much, man. Let's
Yep.
go.